Don't know what that was.
I have no idea what happened then. There's a ghost in the machine.
I had one gig booked down that I had to go and we did like a 15-hour round trip in the middle of it, and it just happened to work because that gig was it was 2:00 in the afternoon, and my Edinburgh show was at 2:00 in the afternoon, so I had a full 24 hours to get down, do the show, and get back again.
Wow.
So yeah, it was good. And we only missed one show at the Fringe, so yeah, that was amazing as well. Again, really hard because like you've got to be constantly out there and self-promoting and all of that stuff. But I loved it, and what it's going to give me is we sort of cheated last year with the show. The show that we toured was basically the same show I'd done a couple of years earlier, so we knew it quite well. The plan is that going forward, I'll do Edinburgh every August, and my tour is in September, October every year. Obviously, this year we just pushed it back to next year, but August and then September, October on tour. So that gives me August to run the show and just get it really tight. I watched an interview I've got a massive man crush on Ricky Gervais, and I watched an interview with him recently, and he said on a podcast called The True Geordie, and he said that before his last tour went on sale, 10,000 people had seen it for free. Nice. Because he did 40 gigs for 250 people.
Yeah.
And that was it. So when the tickets went on sale for 50, 60, 100 quid, whatever they were, the people who were paying that money had seen a perfect show.
Yeah.
And so I sort of see Edinburgh as that for me. 3,000 people saw the show last year. So I sort of see that as a really good way to warm up before we go on tour.
Yeah. I mean, and that's especially with hypnosis, because there's so many variables. Getting out there, performing and polishing the show is a great thing. You know, like I said, there's a lot of guys that, unfortunately, if they don't get the stage time, then drive the price down and kind of go out cheap or free to get experience. Whereas getting out there and doing it properly is the best way to do it, really. So, is there a venue or a town that you just kind of go, I'm never going back there? For some reason, either they're I have a town I don't work. I couldn't possibly. Oh God, yeah. You can't be funny in Liverpool when everybody in Liverpool is the funniest person in the room. So
you don't do Liverpool?
I don't do Liverpool.
That's hilarious.
Oh, it's just you know, when you go to a place, you have a bad experience. You go to a place again, you have a bad experience, and then you get to a place again. I had another hypnotist who doesn't work now. It's a nice corporate Christmas do. And I had a look on their Facebook, all contracted and everything. I look on their Facebook 2 days beforehand and saw this other hypnotist has tagged that he was going to this hotel for a job. And I thought, oh, well, what are the odds of them having two? And then it turned out that the DJ that works in this particular hotel knew a hypnotist who worked at the holiday abroad type thing, who would do it cheaper. And he went and did it. And at first I was like, I can't believe a fellow professional has done that. And then that night on Facebook, he was putting all the messages going, what an absolutely bunch of bastards. They ruined my show and this, that, and other. And I thought, that's three warning flags. Liverpool for me, it doesn't work. The first time I've gigged Liverpool, I'm not lying, I was sat there waiting to go on stage, and I've looked across at this fellow who didn't look well, and he was just sick down himself. It was disgusting. The barmaids come over, looked at him, called him a terrible word, and then started mopping around him and cleaning it up. And I'm like, are you not going to ask him to leave? So it's like, for me, Liverpool it's a place I don't work. Is there anywhere you don't work?
There isn't, but I really struggle in the West Midlands. Anywhere, well, for the most part, anywhere like around Birmingham, that sort of area has been a bit of a nightmare for me generally. And it stemmed from the tour. We had a couple of nights where the shows just had to be pulled just because we didn't sell enough tickets. Again, big learning lessons. And that still costs you a fortune because you've still advertised it and done all the rest of it. So there was a couple of shows we had to pull. There was one that we made work, and it was a really good show, but it was hard work to get there. And there was a gig that we did on the tour that didn't go very well, and that was in the Midlands. So for me, and that theatre, unfortunately, has been hit by COVID and closed, unfortunately. But that was a place I was never going to go back.
Yeah. I think you get these areas where you kind of go, right, that when you've had 2 or 3 bad experiences, you write it off completely.
I say that we are going back to Birmingham the tour next year. So anyone in Birmingham.
Oh, brilliant.
Ignore what I'm saying.
Yeah. And after COVID, I need the money, so I work Liverpool. I mean, where's the tour at for the kind of the autumn season, which we're about to go into now? Where was it at with that? Do you still have any dates in for this year?
No, so we moved everything. It came down to, it was before the UK went into lockdown. I felt a bit tetchy about what might happen.
Yeah.
And then the country did go into lockdown, and I thought, I've got a choice now. I can either put a massive advertising budget into selling a 20, because it's a 27 date tour.
Yeah.
So I can either put a massive advertising budget into selling 27 dates up and down the country, and find out that because of coronavirus, I can't do the show. And then all of that money is lost.
Yeah.
Or I can make the decision to cancel it, well, push it back a year. And then at least it's within my own terms, because I believe that we'll be back to normal-ish by this time next year. So and then Cameron McIntosh came out and said that none of his theaters were likely to be open this side of Christmas. And I thought, that says loads. I got lots of friends who work in theatre, and they're all saying similar things. So I just made the decision to pull it. Unfortunately, all of the theatres, every one of them, with the exception of, well, all of them were amazing, and all of them just picked up the date and moved it to next year. Now, we were lucky in two regards. One is we already had a lot of dates penciled for next year anyway. So all we've done is I've said, well, let's just pick up that date and just replace it with the one we've already got penciled. The only one that was difficult wasn't difficult because they're horrible people. They're undergoing a 2-year refurbishment, and that means they'll be closed until 2023. So we were like, okay, great, nothing we can do there. So the whole tour, with the exception of 2 dates that are still penciled because they're trying to shuffle everything around, has just been rescheduled to September, October 2021. But I wanted to push it. If I'm going to push it back, I want to push it all the way back. I don't want to push it to the spring. And still be at risk and not have the full, because at the minute, if we had posters and flyers in theaters, nobody's getting them. So fortunately, under the circumstances of, like, moving shows for theaters is the most painful thing, or canceling shows, but they were all amazing just because every show that should be on right now is in the same boat.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what helps. And it gives you longer to build it up and find out exactly where things are. I know next week we've got Patrick Picard on, the Belgium hypnotist, who's the only guy who has worked solidly through COVID.
Really?
He was supposed to be on a couple of weeks ago, but he's doing a tour in France, and he's doing like 4 nights a week doing the holiday parks in France, and it's like he has not stopped working throughout the whole thing. So how that's going to work with France and their lockdown, I have no idea, but it'll be interesting to speak to him next week just to see how he's doing it with social distancing, and how that works out for him. But I know I've had a couple of inquiries for shows in lockdown going, oh, it's a private party, can you do this? And it's like, it's not worth the risk now doing something that's going to ruin it for everybody.
No, I agree.
So,
totally agree.
Yeah, it's a crazy world, but hopefully things will. A venue that I book messaged me 2 days ago, kind of going, are we still going ahead? Bear in mind, it's all paid for. Are we still going ahead with the booking? If we are, it's limited to 40 people. I'm like, well, no. Do you know what I mean? But they're trying to make me cancel it rather than them canceling it. So we're trying to find out where that line's financially.
It's a mutual breakup, I think, is what you need there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the only option. So what's next for you? You're probably one of the few hypnotists that you don't have a book out yet at the moment.
A book?
Yeah. Have you got one yet? Are you writing one yet?
Absolutely no chance. I actually have. Obviously, back in the day, we released the Seesaw induction DVD, which Alex Smith released. And I did a lecture for Penguin Magic, who are a magic shop in Ohio. So they fly out magicians and mentalists and stuff to do lectures that are broadcast live. So I did a Penguin lecture on stage hypnosis from the angle of somebody who's a magician and wants to move into that world. But actually, I have no interest in teaching hypnosis or talking about it or going that route. I've worked with a couple of people, like one-on-one, but I have no desire to be part of that world. So there's definitely none of that happening. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. The plan is that the tour will get bigger and better. The plan is that there's Alex doing his thing. The plan is that the tour will get bigger and better.
There we go.
And we'll do more and more venues. I make no money from the sales of that DVD. So that's the plan. Like I'm still doing odd gigs I'm still doing odd gigs. Like I'm not suddenly not available for hire anymore, because if the gig is right, I'll take it. But I'm doing very few. I've cancelled, like, what used to be my student season is now overtaken, because September is now the tour season, the theatre tour season, and that's just the direction I want to take it in. And I basically I want to do, we had an interesting conversation with the theatre manager at the back end of last year. The last night of the tour, I was talking to the theatre manager, Chris, and he said, who was at the show, and he said, it's really interesting. He said, for the first time the first time ever, we've got a whole generation, maybe 2 generations of people who don't actually know what a hypnosis show is. So like when I was doing universities, we had these kids of 18, 19 year olds coming in. I was the same age as some of them when I started doing it. And they've never seen a hypnotist before, or a handful of them have, because they saw one in Marbella or somewhere. And so that's a huge problem. What used to happen was you just put the word hypnotist on a poster and everybody knew what that was and what the show was going to be. Now you put the word hypnotist on a poster, and I don't want to offend anybody, but anybody being over the age of 30 might know what one is. Over the age of 40, 50, you definitely know what that is, which is why my audience is mostly full of that age bracket. So my goal is to make hypnosis really accessible and cool again. Not that I'm cool, but to make hypnosis accessible and cool again for a younger audience of people. Because when young people do come in, because their grandparents have brought them or their parents have brought them, when I say young people, I mean people in their 18, 19 and 20s, they love it, but they've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah. And I think talking about when you say about the student market, I did a few universities, but I noticed how that market was changing, how it had gone from being very much, this is what we want, to very much now very, very PC, to the point where it makes the show almost impossible to do. I literally had a manager, a booker, tell me to use gender neutral language on stage, and it's like, it makes it very difficult. So I
started to see that happening for sure.
It's that market. I think they're not. There's less and less of them booking stage hypnosis shows now, which is, it's the way of the world, I suppose. But the way you're doing it is right. By putting on the theatre shows and the production shows, it makes people go, oh, what's that? It opens their curiosity. So that's a good thing. Yeah, Brian Glenn says...
It's really hard, but love it.
Yeah, Brian Glenn says, you've got to do 2 shows a night to make it worthwhile. So, yeah. So Brian is... do you know Brian Glenn?
I don't think I do.
Brian Glenn was a stage hypnotist that opened a hypnotherapy training school. It's quite a large hypnotherapy training school as well.
Oh, cool.
He lives in a cave in Spain now. By
Sounds
choice.
Like the place to live.
Yeah,
sounds like the place to live in coronavirus world.
It's a nice cave by all accounts. So there we go. Oh, there we go. And Robert Temple's Penguin Live lecture. There's a link just been put up there by Alex William Smith.
Cheers, mate.
There you go.
I had a blast doing that.
Yeah, well, it's been good fun. Right, I always ask guests for either a top tip or a book recommendation. So I'll leave it up to you whether you want to give a top tip for someone that's wanting to start performing stage hypnosis, or if you have a book that kind of changed your perspective on either your career, your success path, or your performance.
Top tip. I'll do a top tip. What's a top tip from somebody wanting to start out in hypnosis? I think the first thing is you can get stage time in, but it doesn't have to be as a hypnotist. I think, like I said earlier, the stage time that I had doing magic growing up, the stage time I had on the radio, the stage time I did mobile discos for a bit when I was 16, the stage time I had doing stand-up, like just get some stage time doing anything at all. Yeah, and that will support it, because I believe, so there's an old quote in the magic world that was said hundreds of years ago that a magician is merely an actor playing the part of a magician. And I think that's wholly true. I think it's way more true for a stage hypnotist, though.
Very much
because anyone doing it knows, in the world of stage hypnosis, it's mostly performance, and the hypnosis comes along with that quite naturally. You can be the world's most technically brilliant hypnotist, and if you can't perform it, then nobody gives a toss. So I think for me, if you can get stage time in and just learn to be a better performer, a really good performer with very bad hypnosis skills, could pull off a much better show than a technically competent hypnotist with no performance skills at all. So get stage time in, do anything, go and join. And there's loads of ways to do it. Join, there's improv classes for adults. Go and try that. That's fun. Just do anything that gets you stage time, doing anything.
Yeah. No, do you know what? That is an absolutely solid piece of advice there. You know what I mean? It's one of the things. I used to be a very nervous public speaker, and I did a few things. I joined a lodge, so you're forced to stand up there and talk. You've got Toastmasters, various different things that force you to get out
Like
there and talk. Yeah, brilliant.
Amateur dramatics, like every town in the country's got an amateur dramatics theatre. Go and do some plays for nothing, for the fun of it and the camaraderie of it.
Yeah, Brenda Case says, great advice, totally agree. Brenda's a phenomenal female hypnotist that does the cruise ships. So yeah, Robert, it's been an absolute blast. Thank you for coming on as well. And yeah, hopefully people will check out your Penguin Magic Lecture and the transparency template. And yeah, you take care, and yeah, take care and see you soon.
Cheers, man.